Mr. Mendoza, you're up with Senate Bill 300.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I'm here to present SB 300, which removes a competitive disadvantage for California pawnbrokers so that they can compete with a growing trend towards online pawnbroker lending. Unlike out-of-state pawnbrokers conducting online business in California, California-based pawnbrokers provide loans. The providing loans must obtain the thumbprint of the person pledging the property as collateral from the loan. SB 300 allows for the California-based pawnbrokers to conduct electronic pawnbroking transactions by replacing the thumbprint requirement with a new requirement that loans be transferred into the bank account of the consumer requesting the loan. With that, I'll turn it over to my speakers in support.
Bill Duplessis, representing the California Pawnbrokers Association, and I wanted to thank the committee for their time, certainly, and rather than take the committee's valuable time addressing anything but the opposition and the recommendation from the observations made by the staff, I wanted to explain that in the case of an online pawn transaction, the items, if the pawn loan were to be successful, that is, if the pawnbroker were to decide that he and the pledger were to agree on the amount of money for the pawn loan, the rules governing all pawn transactions in California would still apply. That is, the items would have to be stored either on the location on the license or if an off-site location, they would have to be retrieved within 2 days. The other committee question was that there possibly would be some inclination on behalf of pawnbrokers to charge pledgers or potential pledgers, in this case, the mailing or transportation fee for the items to go back and forth to the pawn shop, and that certainly would not be, because all of our charges are all prospective, and unless we had authority, statutory authority to make those charges, we would not be able to do it, and certainly not our intention that would happen. And if I could take just a moment to say, sadly, the California Pawnbrokers, as you know, we do a tremendous number of bills over the decades, and we've always been on the side of law enforcement, and it's a place we're comfortable and happy to be. And the California Police Chiefs is opposing the bill, and I think viscerally from a very good reason. They don't want to give up a thumbprint. But the only thing that prevents a California pawnbroker from competing with pawnbrokers throughout the United States on the internet is a thumbprint. We would love to be able to capture the thumbprint and send it into the DOJ with the rest of our required information. The problem is the technology doesn't exist to link that thumbprint to the person making the loan, and therefore it'd be impossible to do so. Approximately 20% of the people in the United States doing pawn loans have to collect a thumbprint, and its value to law enforcement is certainly up to law enforcement to decide. In all electronic trading or commerce, the only place that we know of, at least, that a thumbprint is even required would be in pawnbroking. That wouldn't be true, say, for eBay transactions, Amazon, Craigslist, what have you, when you're doing business electronically. So we feel badly that the Cal Chiefs are opposed. If we could figure out a way, which we certainly tried to do, many of you will remember that we sponsored ACR 101, Jones Sawyer, last year, which was intended to bring the stakeholders together to find some alternative that would be acceptable or at least give some comfort to law enforcement as far as not getting this thumbprint only on the electronic transactions. Nothing changes in our in-store transactions whatsoever. And one of the things we did come up with was the idea that we would transmit the proceeds of the loan only to a bank account rather than directly to the pledger as we would do in our store. And again, I regret that there is opposition. We tried real hard to make sure a long time ago to work this up so that there wouldn't be, but anyway, that's the situation we're left in at this point. It came out of the Senate 39-0 and a couple of weeks ago out of banking 11-0. So I'm hopeful that this committee will also look favorably on our need to get into this business, because we're getting our bones picked clean by out-of-state people who don't have that requirement. So thank you very much.
Any others in support?
My name is Jan Schneider. I'm legislative chair for CAPA, the California Pawnbrokers Association. Very quick story. I own a store in San Jose, California. Between our last hearing in Assembly Banking 2 weeks ago and today, we had a new customer come into our store. He pawned a very high-end wall clock about this big, and my son, who works with me, did the loan. He came back right before the holiday this weekend and brought in another clock, the identical clock, its twin, and pawned it. And in doing the transaction and chatting with my son, he said, you know, I'm a collector. I collect watches and clocks, everything high-end, and I have another $126,000 in pawn loans. So my son, as he's been trained to do, said, well, where are they? We'll be happy to go with you, pay to get them out, and bring them to our store, because we discovered that where they were pawned, he was paying a much higher interest rate than what we charge. He said, well, that'd be great, except I pawned them over the internet, and they're in Colorado with a company called Borrow. So there is no doubt that California small business is losing business to these out-of-state lenders that can do transactions over the internet. And we're losing them to people in our own towns, in our own neighborhoods that should be coming to us. Thank you.
Tony DeMarco, I'm president of the California Pawnbrokers Association and in support of this bill.
Anyone in opposition to the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Privacy Committee. And thank you for Senator Mendoza for bringing this important issue forward. I have a couple of formal remarks I want to make, which I think are important for you to hear, but I want to just start with what Mr. Duplessis said at the end of his comments. It's not true that the technology doesn't exist to get the fingerprints electronically. Okay, it's not true. If you want to make a decision to approve SB 300 based upon its policy, that's fine, but don't do it based upon the false notion that the technology doesn't exist. I'll cover that in my prepared remarks. It does exist, and it's being used currently. Number two, Mr. Duplessis said in his closing remarks that only 20% of pawn shops across the country require fingerprints. I don't actually know if that statistic is accurate, but let us just stipulate that it is. California has a very robust set of regulations that govern pawn shops, much more robust than other states. Many states have no regulations governing pawn shops. So if you want to quickly devolve California down to the status of all other states in this particular policy area, then you can do that. But please understand, when the sponsors of this bill say that many other states don't have these requirements, many other states don't have the consumer protections that California has in place. So I think that's important. Detective Curtis Shurtloff of the Clovis Police Department utilized the law enforcement automated database search to recover a stolen firearm in a secondhand shop in Clovis, California. Shortly after, Detective Shurtloff was able to return the firearm to its rightful owner. In Riverside County, crime analyst Stephanie Robinson recovered $4,000 worth of stolen jewelry by entering the information of the suspect into the law enforcement automated database, or LEADS, and finding that this suspect had indeed sold this property. Members of this committee, I could go on and on with many examples, but I'm sure you don't want me to in the interest of time. But I'm sure you also see the point. The identifying information provided at the time of a secondhand sale at a pawn shop protects consumers. It protects victims. It protects your constituents, okay? Law enforcement up and down the state of California utilize fingerprints on a daily basis and other leads online to successfully solve criminal cases involving stolen property, stolen from your constituents at pawn stores, and we can consistently see law enforcement agencies and store owners partnering together to stop criminals from using pawn stores in their fencing operations. We would hope that the pawn industry would continue to support this collaborative partnership. Over the past few months, we've heard some really hard-to-believe claims that law enforcement doesn't even use the fingerprints collected by the industry when it does its investigations. I'm here to tell you today, based upon the California Police Chief Association, that that's simply not true. They do use those fingerprints. They do use the fingerprints on the JUS 123s. They absolutely do. Interestingly, I haven't heard a single law enforcement professional step forward and make the statement, no, we don't use the fingerprints, we don't need them. Not one. So let's see if there's one today that does that. Let us instead allow law enforcement to speak to how they would solve crimes with the required information that you would delete through the passage of this bill today. Currently, information collected by pawned and secondhand dealers is recorded on a JUS 123 form that is submitted to the dealer's respective law enforcement agency, either physically or electronically. An investigation that involves a transaction conducted at a pawn shop or secondhand dealer often revolves around the accuracy of the information on that JUS 123. It is critical, and the fingerprint is a critical component of it. Each piece of data recorded on this form is critical as it directly related to either a person pledging or a person selling the property itself. The legible fingerprint is one piece of information provided by the seller that becomes essential during any future criminal investigation and that requires the positive identification of the person who conducted the transaction. The reliability of fingerprint analysis allows investigators to determine a suspect's true identity beyond any reasonable doubt, which you will give up with the passage of this bill. There will be plenty of reasonable doubt. Oftentimes, the suspect will admit to the transaction, making the fingerprint a moot point. Fair enough. However, take the fingerprint away, and it makes the investigation much more difficult. Indeed, without the fingerprint, many investigations will be completely thwarted and will end right there and then. Of even greater importance, many investigations unrelated to stolen property, things like murder, identity theft, and other crimes, they find their way into pawned and secondhand dealers' shops. Industry leaders in electronic transaction reporting have many success stories related to homicide or home invasion robberies where the suspects take the victim's stolen property into a pawn or secondhand dealer, and it's through that fingerprint that they're then able to solve these murders, kidnaps, and other unrelated crimes. Members, imagine the significance of a legible fingerprint in one of these cases where an interview with the suspect is less likely, and any piece of physical evidence could be crucial to getting a successful charge and conviction. Fingerprints serve as the primary evidentiary consideration of a person's identity. The California Police Chiefs Association and other law enforcement agencies will urge you to reject any measure that would remove this tool from the law enforcement toolbox. The sponsor of SB 300 claims that California law will essentially shut them down, that is the pawnbrokers, out of this internet market because there is no technology that will allow for the transmission of fingerprints. I'm here to tell you today that's not true. This is a false statement as the technology most definitely exists. Companies such as EcoATM require fingerprints in their business model, which is a form of electronic fingerprint submission. Leads Online and Business Watch are established industry leaders providing pawn data that have developed the software tools, the very specific tools that they say doesn't exist have already been developed, that collect electronic fingerprints and submit them electronically to law enforcement. There is no reason why we have to abandon the fingerprint, electronically or not, in this state. The desire to require internet pawn transactions to comply with existing California law is up to you. It's up to the legislature to decide whether you want to pass this bill or not. But please don't pass this bill because you believe that the technology doesn't exist. It's not true, and frankly, it's not a good enough reason. We would respectfully ask you to consider each one of these points as the passage of this bill in its current form would adversely affect law enforcement's continued efforts in the direction, investigation, and prosecution of crimes that relate to pawn or secondhand dealer transactions. It would adversely impact the safety of your constituents. The risks surely outweigh the benefits. While there is no intent to interfere with the pawn industry's desire to capitalize on a potential internet pawning market, California does not need to pass a law that reduces consumer protection simply because the sponsor says there's no alternatives, when clearly there are. There are solutions. Those solutions are being overlooked. We urge you not to make California on par with all the other states that don't regulate in this area. For all of these reasons and for your constituent safety, we would respectfully ask for a no vote on SB 300.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other no's out there? Okay, seeing none. Before we move to questions from the committee, you want to respond to anything, Senator? Or?
I could do it in my closing if you want to say.
Whatever
Yeah,
your
that-
preference
I'll
is.
just
No,
take
okay,
questions
we'll
right
go
now.
ahead and move to questions from the committee. Mr. Calderon?
I think what I appreciate about this bill is keeping California businesses, specifically pawn businesses, competitive with other businesses in other states that we seem to be losing in this state business from. The question of a thumbprint or fingerprint that could be used through an electronic transaction is an interesting idea. If we were to do that, assuming that technology exists, who would store that information? Would that information, because you're now putting an electronic fingerprint online, which can be used to steal a person's identity. Now, do you entrust a private company to hold that information? These private companies get breached all the time because generally the criminal is always working hard and is going to find a way in through the firewalls to get that information. And what can they do with that information where there's now a fingerprint online where it may not have existed before because we had implemented that? My concern would be it seems reasonable to, if the technology existed, to have a fingerprint online, but in the storing of that information and the risk of some company being breached and having that information getting out and the risks that come with that, is that something that is being taken into consideration within your opposition to this bill? And, has there been any thought as to what that effect would be and who would hold that information and how would you manage that information?
Mr. Calderon, is that a question to me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. So we would be happy to engage at length on this particular question. I see no compelling reason why this bill has to leave this committee today. We are in the first year of a 2-year session. There's more time left in this first half of the year of the session. And if we could hold a hearing where we have a little bit more time and bandwidth, no pun intended, to talk about the alternatives, we'd be happy to engage in that and bring some of our experts up here to address your question. The issue that you raise is an important one. It's not that big of an obstacle, and I'm quite confident that we could find solutions that would satisfy your need for your constituents' privacy, sir.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate the response, and you could either respond now on your side or within your closing.
Just briefly want to add, and I'll have Bill also answer it because he knows more of the front line, what goes on within the industry. But they've been working on this since last year when we had the previous bill that brought the working group together to come up with a solution. That was the idea of directly depositing into their bank account, because when they take out their money, they have to use their ID, and when they open up their checking account, they will have a thumbprint. So it's already been kind of discussed as last year. For them to kind of stall the bill and say, let's have some more time, is a delay tactic. And I'll just go let Bill answer that.
Yes. Assemblyman Calderon, let me first tell you that the thumbprints go currently at 391 from a couple of years ago. I think, maybe you were here, maybe you weren't. Right about the time you came here, 391 established a uniform statewide database. Pawnbrokers have only one place that because of the financial privacy limitations of pawnbrokers, because they are loans after all, they only have one exception as to how they can transmit that information. And by the provisions of AB 391 PAN from 2012, those thumbprints on the JUS 123 form, which is now, of course, the electronic form, go to the Department of Justice. Law enforcement statewide can now access that, and they're in the midst of the data or the beta testing, and this is momentarily coming online. But for instance, transmitting a thumbprint from a location, for instance, Mr. Shee referenced Echo ATM. California Pawnbrokers worked with the sponsors of the recent Eggman bill that probably this committee heard that bill. I don't know, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Echo ATMs are just like pawn shops in that they are a physical location. They're in a mall. They're the little green kiosks. And yes, people wishing to then they only do mobile phones, but wishing to get money for their mobile phones, they do put their thumb into a thumb pad, exactly the same way that we do in our stores, exactly the same way, an electronic thumb pad. And as we transmit to DOJ, they transmit to DOJ. The problem is when you're dealing with the public wanting to do business electronically, they have no such thumb pads with links to the DOJ. So an Echo ATM is essentially a pawn shop. It operates the same way. It makes a report. Each machine has to be licensed as a location and get a state secondhand dealer's license. As far as the technology, we tried and looked high and low for a specific technology where the general public could use to transmit a thumbprint and have some verification that it was in fact the same person that was asking for the loan that we had the thumbprint for. For instance, we thought of having them take an iPhone and going like that and taking a picture of it, sending it along with the report. The problem is you don't know if that's my thumbprint or Senator Mendoza's thumbprint. That's the problem with it.
Well, if you could do that, then maybe you could vote on your phone. Yeah. I don't know. You have to be able to trust that technology.
Mr. Calderon, since the author of the bill suggested what I said was a stalling tactic, I'd like to respond. It's not a stalling tactic. This bill flew out of the Senate without a really tough hearing, came off the Senate floor unanimously. There was no debate. We're here in this House now. There's plenty of time, and we can have a debate. I don't disagree with what Mr. Duplessis said about the business model of Echo ATM, but there are other companies that are leaders in the fingerprint identification software that have products that can be used. Okay, you can't just simply say, well, we have to pass this bill because the technology doesn't exist. It does exist. And we're not stalling. We're happy to engage in the debate. We just want to make sure that the legislature understands that sometimes there are unintended consequences to the passage of certain policies. And the unintended consequence of the passage of SB 300 is going to be it's going to make it much easier for criminal elements in our communities to fence stolen property through the pawning process. That's a fact. And that's why the Police Chief Association opposes this bill.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
just to finish up.
Okay.
This has been an ongoing conversation. I think it needs to continue to be an ongoing conversation. We do have the issue of business leaving this state and our businesses in this state that are being affected by it. But that doesn't mean we cannot still have this conversation about thumbprint and how we implement that online. It seems like there really is no concise answer of what that would look like and how to implement that and who we would get it from. I'd be interested in having, or participating in a hearing where we can figure out the type of technology that exists to allow us that right now. I think that this bill is worthy of moving forward, but this needs to continue to be a conversation as we move on with this issue. But thank you.
Seeing no more questions, Senator, if you could go to your close.
Thank you so much. 2 points real quick, members. I know we're taking a lot of time on this issue. First, the numerous online marketplaces out there and out-of-state pawnbrokers that people who actually want to sell stolen property could actually go to and do it without having to have a thumbprint requirement. This is happening right now. Whoever wants to come to California and try to do that, we have the most over-regulated pawn industry in the country. So they're not really going to come to our state and start selling stolen goods and so forth. I think that's not going to happen. And if you think back, look who's opposed. If this was a serious law enforcement issue that has really going to bring law enforcement against it, they'll be lined up right here saying, wow, they don't do this to us. They're not. They're not. If they were, I probably wouldn't be carrying this bill. This is a safe measure. It is long overdue. We need to make this industry competitive with the rest of the country, and I just respectfully ask for your aye vote, members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. The recommendation is due, pass, and send to approbe. So if the clerk could read the roll.
Gatto. Wilk.
Aye.
Wilk, aye. Baker. Calderon. Aye. Calderon, aye. Chang. Aye. Chang, aye. Chow. Cooper. Aye. Cooper, aye. DeBobne. Aye. DeBobne, aye. Daly. Aye. Daly, aye. Gordon. Aye. Gordon, aye. Lowe. Aye. Lowe, aye.
Senator, you received 8 votes, so the bill's out, and we'll leave the roll open so members can add on. Senator Gaines, you lucked out. You're up next. And you have 2 bills, SB 170 and then SB 271.
Yes, great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair Wilk and members. Today I want to present to you Senate Bill 271. This bill would make it an infraction to knowingly and intentionally fly unmanned aircraft, popularly known as drones, up to 350 feet over a public school during school hours and extra. Sir, wonderful. Should I continue? Would you like me to continue? Yeah. I would like to ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Others in support?
John Lovell with the California Police Chiefs Association. I will dispense with my 45 minutes of testimony in support.
Any others in support?
Mr. Chair, Ryan Sherman on behalf of Los Angeles County Professional Peace Officers, Long Beach Police Officers, Sacramento Deputy Sheriffs, and the California Fraternal Order of Police, all in support. Thank you.
Just listing your clients next time.
Anyone in opposition? Seeing none, questions or comments from the committee? Mr. Cooper.
Just a quick question for the author. I know it says once the principal informs them they can't fly it over, they have to leave. But for a school that's in session, does it say in the bill anywhere about having prior approval? Well, especially for the media, for instance.
Yeah, there's an exemption for media. And basically what the bill does is it gives the authority to the principal in terms of how the rules would be laid out for the use of drones at the school itself. So if there's a demonstration or something that maybe a child wanted to make during school hours that used a drone, that would be admissible based on the guidelines set up by the principal.
Well, and the reason I ask, obviously the media can't come on school grounds to begin with without permission. So to fly
there's an exemption here for media.
But what I'm saying is, prior to coming on school grounds, anyone has to check in to do that. But with the drone piece, shouldn't they have prior permission versus the principal telling them after the fact? Maybe I read it wrong.
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I have to get clarification. I know that we have the exemption.
No, this is schools. But for schools, though, is what I'm saying, for schools.
Right.
So that's why I'm asking you. We're on 271, right? Okay. Yeah. So with the schools, like I said, you can't come on school property unless you have permission, no matter who you are. So with drones for the media, I would think ahead of time we would have to have them obtain permission versus the principal telling them after the fact, okay, your drone's flying overhead, get it off our property.
Okay. Thank you for the question. It does require the news media to stop the use of a drone over a school grounds upon the request of a school principal.
But maybe we should have that. Maybe you'll take an amendment to change that ahead of time. Like I said, they can't come on the school grounds to begin with without permission. They have to have permission to be there. So why would we allow a lesser issue with the drone to fly over?
Yeah, I'd be open to that. That makes
sense.
sense.
I mean, you don't have to. I'm just saying I think it would strengthen your bill more.
You raise a good issue, good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, this bill, if it clears the committee, will go to Education Committee, so he has time to take that into consideration. Right? We heard from opposition? Okay, so we're good on that. Any other questions? Senator, if you can go to your close then.
I just appreciate your support.
Again, this is
a way to protect children and
thank you. So the recommendation is due, pass, and send to Education Committee. Clerk, if you could read the roll.
Gatto. Wilk.
Aye.
Wilk, aye. Baker. Calderon. Calderon, aye. Chang. Chang, aye. Chow. Cooper. Cooper, aye. DeBobne. DeBobne, aye. Daly. Daly, aye. Gordon. Gordon, aye. Lowe. Lowe, aye.
8-0, your bill's out, and we'll leave the roll open so other members can add on. So congratulations on that. And then if you could move to SB 170.
Thank you.